You don't lack motivation. You lack discipline. And that truth offends people. Because motivation feels uncomfortable. But let me say something most people are afraid to say out loud. If you can't control yourself, life will control you. Look around. Most people are not free. They are being dragged by their impulses. They wake up when they feel like it. They work when they feel inspired. They quit when it gets uncomfortable. Most people live their entire lives believing that every thought they have is who they are, every impulse that appears must be obeyed, every urge must be satisfied, and this single misunderstanding quietly destroys their power without them ever noticing it. A desire rises and they immediately move toward it, a feeling appears and they surrender, an emotion pulls and they follow, never stopping to ask who is doing the following and who is being followed. The truth is uncomfortable, but once you hear it, you cannot unhear it. An impulse is not you, a thought is not you, an emotion is not you, they are events happening within you, and the moment you confuse the event with the observer, you lose control of your life. Watch carefully how impulses behave. They appear suddenly, demand immediate relief, and disappear just as quickly. Yet people build entire identities around these temporary movements of the mind. Discipline begins the instant you pause and realize that you can witness an impulse without obeying it, that you can feel a desire without becoming its servant, that you can experience discomfort without running from it. This pause is not weakness, it is power, because in that space between urge and action, freedom is born. When you stop reacting automatically, you reclaim authorship over your behavior, and behavior repeated becomes destiny. Every time you resist the reflex to act, you strengthen the part of you that is awake, the part that chooses, the part that leads instead of follows. This is why most people feel trapped without knowing why. They are not controlled by governments, systems, or circumstances first, they are controlled by their own unchecked impulses. Hunger tells them when to stop working, boredom tells them when to quit, fear tells them when to stay small, pleasure tells them when to waste time, and they call this freedom when it is nothing but unconscious obedience. The disciplined person lives differently, not because they suppress life, but because they understand it. They see an impulse arise and they smile inwardly, knowing it has no authority unless granted, knowing that they are not required to act simply because something is felt. This understanding changes everything, because once you stop identifying with impulses, you stop being dragged by them, and when you stop being dragged, you can finally choose a direction. Choice is the foundation of discipline, and discipline is the foundation of self-respect. You do not gain confidence by winning every battle outside, you gain it by not losing the battles inside. Each time you choose intention over impulse, you build inner order, and inner order reflects outward as calm, clarity, and quiet strength. People will call it willpower, but it is deeper than that, it is awareness in motion. When you understand that you are the watcher of the mind and not the mind itself, life stops happening to you and starts unfolding through you, and this is the beginning of real discipline, not as control, but as mastery of self in a world that profits from your unconsciousness. Most people believe discipline is about forcing themselves to do what they hate, about crushing desire, fighting temptation, and living in constant internal war, but this misunderstanding is exactly why discipline's heavy, exhausting, and temporary for them. Force creates resistance, and resistance always pushes back, which is why willpower collapses the moment pressure increases. Real discipline does not come from shouting at yourself or punishing your mind, it comes from seeing clearly, because when you truly see the consequence of an action, you no longer need to be forced away from it. Awareness changes behavior effortlessly. A child does not need discipline to avoid touching fire once they understand it burns. And in the same way, a conscious person does not need violence against the self to live with order. When you are aware, your choices become natural, not heroic. You stop eating what weakens you not because you are strict, but because you understand how it dulls your energy. You stop wasting time not because you are rigid, but because you see how distraction steals your life quietly, minute by minute. Discipline born from awareness feels calm, not aggressive, grounded, not tense, and this is why it lasts. Force demands constant effort, but awareness operates continuously without exhaustion. Most people fail at discipline because they are trying to control behavior without understanding the mind that creates it. They attack symptoms instead of seeing the source. They say they want to change, yet they never pause long enough to observe their patterns, never sit with discomfort long enough to learn from it, never watch their reactions long enough to understand what truly drives them. Awareness requires honesty, and honesty is uncomfortable, because it exposes the games you play with yourself, the excuses you repeat, the distractions you hide behind. But once you see these patterns clearly, they lose their power over you. You no longer need to fight laziness when you understand how avoidance feeds fear. You no longer need to fight procrastination when you see how clarity removes resistance. Discipline becomes alignment, not struggle. Your actions begin to match your values naturally, the way a compass aligns with north without effort. This is why awareness-based discipline feels light while forced discipline feels heavy. One builds inner peace, the other builds inner conflict. When you are aware, you do not act impulsively, but you also do not suppress, you choose. You respond instead of react. You move with intention instead of habit, and this creates a different kind of power, quiet but unbreakable. People will think you are disciplined, but what they are really witnessing is clarity. You are not driven by fear of failure or hunger for approval, you are guided by understanding. In this state, discipline is no longer something you do, it is something you live. Your life becomes ordered without rigidity, focused without tension, strong without aggression. This is the discipline that transforms character, because it is rooted not in control but in consciousness, and consciousness once awakened does not need force to remain awake. People are obsessed with the idea of freedom, yet most have never questioned what freedom actually means, and because of that, they unknowingly destroy it with their own hands. They imagine freedom as doing whatever they want, whenever they want, with no rules, no structure, no limits, and this fantasy sounds beautiful until you watch what it produces in real life. A life without structure becomes a life without direction, and a life without direction slowly turns into chaos disguised as choice. When there are no boundaries, the mind does not become liberated, it becomes scattered, pulled in 1,000 directions by impulse, emotion, distraction, and fear. True freedom does not come from the absence of structure, it comes from the right structure, because structure gives energy a direction to flow. Think about it clearly: a river without banks spreads into a swamp, weak and unfocused, but a river with banks gains speed, depth, and power. The same is true for the human mind and life. Discipline is not a cage, it is a container, and without a container, even the greatest potential leaks away unnoticed. Most people resist structure because they associate it with control imposed from the outside, but self-discipline is structure chosen from the inside, and there is a world of difference between the two. When you choose your own structure, you are not limiting yourself, you are protecting what matters. You are deciding where your energy goes instead of allowing the world to decide for you. This is why people who claim to love freedom but reject discipline often feel exhausted, anxious, and unfulfilled. Their energy is constantly escaping through open doors they never learned to close. Structure creates clarity and clarity creates peace. When your days have rhythm, your mind stops racing. When your actions have order, your thoughts begin to settle. When your priorities are clear, temptation loses its grip. Discipline gives your freedom a backbone, something strong enough to support it under pressure. Without structure, freedom collapses the moment life becomes difficult, because there is nothing holding you steady. This is why discipline is not the opposite of freedom, it is the condition for it. Only a disciplined mind can choose instead of react. Only a disciplined life can adapt without falling apart. People who live without structure are not flexible, they are fragile, because chaos shatters them the moment reality stops being comfortable. Structure does not remove spontaneity, it makes spontaneity safe. It allows creativity to emerge without destroying stability. It allows rest without guilt and effort without burnout. When you discipline yourself, you are not obeying rules, you are creating a framework where your highest intentions can survive in a world full of distraction. The strongest people are not the ones who live without limits, they are the ones who have mastered the limits they chose for themselves, and within those limits, they experience a freedom most people will never touch. Most people like to talk about their beliefs, their mindset, their values, and their philosophy, but if you want to know the truth about someone, you don't need to listen to what they say, you need to look at what they do every single day. Your daily routine is your real belief system in action, not the ideas you repeat when you are inspired, not the quotes you share, not the promises you make to yourself at night, but the patterns you follow when no one is watching. The way you wake up, the way you use the first hour of your day, the things you reach for when you feel bored or uncomfortable, the habits you default to when motivation disappears, all of this quietly reveals what you truly serve. You may say you value growth, but if your days are filled with distraction, you are practicing avoidance. You may say you value discipline, but if your routine is chaotic, you are rehearsing disorder. Life does not respond to what you claim to believe, it responds to what you repeatedly do. Every routine is a vote, and over time those votes decide the kind of person you become. This is why change feels so difficult for most people. because they try to change their identity without changing the structure of their days. They want a new future but keep repeating the same schedule, the same reactions, the same escapes, expecting a different outcome. A routine is not neutral, it either strengthens you or weakens you, whether you are aware of it or not. The mind adapts to what you practice, and what you practice daily becomes automatic, effortless, and invisible. That is why the most dangerous habits are not the dramatic ones, but the quiet ones, the small compromises that repeat every day until they feel normal. When you understand this, you stop looking for motivation and start designing your life. You realize that discipline is not about heroic effort, it is about removing friction between who you are and who you want to become. A strong routine does not restrict you, it supports you when your energy is low and your emotions are unstable. It carries you forward on days when you don't feel like trying. This is where real power is built, not in moments of intensity, but in systems of consistency. Your routine teaches your nervous system what to expect, and when expectation becomes stable, resistance disappears. You stop arguing with yourself about what to do, because your day already knows. This creates inner calm, because decision fatigue fades and clarity increases. People admire discipline from the outside, but what they are really seeing is a life where actions and intentions are aligned. When your routine reflects your highest values, discipline stops feeling like pressure and starts feeling like integrity. You no longer feel divided inside, pulled between what you want now and what you want later, because your structure protects your future self automatically. In this way, your daily routine becomes a silent teacher, shaping your character, guiding your choices, and revealing your true philosophy long before you ever speak a word. The greatest addiction of this age does not come in bottles or needles, it comes in notifications, endless scrolling, constant noise, and the illusion of connection, and most people don't even realize they are addicted, because everyone around them is doing the same thing. Distraction has become so normal that silence feels uncomfortable, and the moment there is nothing demanding attention, the hand reaches for a screen automatically, not out of choice, but out of conditioning. This is not accidental, because distraction is profitable, and an undisciplined mind is easy to control. When your attention is constantly pulled outward, you lose the ability to sit with yourself, and without that ability, you lose clarity, depth, and direction. Most people are not lazy, they are overstimulated, and overstimulation destroys focus the same way noise destroys music. Discipline in this world begins with protecting your attention, because whatever holds your attention shapes your reality. When you are constantly distracted, you live on the surface of life, reacting instead of understanding, consuming instead of creating, escaping instead of facing. Stillness is not empty, it is revealing, and that is why people avoid it. In silence, you hear your real thoughts. You feel unresolved emotions, you notice the gap between who you are and who you want to be, and rather than confront that gap, people drown it in noise. Discipline means choosing to stay present when distraction offers you an easy exit. It means sitting with discomfort long enough to learn from it instead of anesthetizing it. The modern world trains you to avoid boredom at all costs, but boredom is not the enemy, it is the doorway to insight. Creativity, clarity, and self-knowledge do not come from constant input, they come from space. When you remove distraction, the mind initially resists, it becomes restless, anxious, even irritated, and this is the moment most people quit, mistaking withdrawal for danger. But if you stay, if you do not run, the mind begins to settle, and beneath the noise you find focus. Beneath focus you find intention, and beneath intention you find direction. Discipline is the courage to be alone with your thoughts without needing to escape them. It is choosing depth over novelty, meaning over stimulation, presence over pleasure. Every time you say no to unnecessary distraction, you say yes to your future, because attention once fragmented cannot build anything lasting. Great work, strong character, and inner peace all require sustained attention, and sustained attention cannot survive in a mind addicted to interruption. When you reclaim your attention, you reclaim your power, because no one can manipulate a mind that is fully present. Silence becomes your ally, not your enemy. Stillness becomes a source of strength, not fear. In a world screaming for your attention, the disciplined person is the one who can remain quiet, focused, and intentional, and that quiet focus becomes a form of rebellion, a form of strength, and a form of freedom that most people will never experience. Real power has nothing to do with controlling other people, dominating conversations, or proving your worth to the world. Because anyone can feel powerful for a moment by overpowering something outside of themselves, but that power is fragile and temporary. The highest form of power is quiet, invisible, and internal, and it begins the moment you stop being at war with yourself. Self-mastery is not about becoming perfect, It is about becoming conscious, because an unconscious person can be manipulated, provoked, distracted, and led without ever realizing it. When you cannot control your reactions, someone else controls you. When your emotions decide your actions, circumstances own you. Most people live like open doors. Anything can enter, anything can disturb them. A comment, a delay, a loss, a desire, and they call this being human, not realizing that strength is the ability to remain steady while life moves around you. Self-mastery means you feel anger without becoming destructive, desire without becoming impulsive, fear without becoming paralyzed. It is the ability to pause internally while the world pushes externally. This is not suppression, this is sovereignty. A mastered self does not deny emotion, it understands it, watches it, and chooses wisely instead of automatically. This is why self-mastery creates unshakable confidence, because it is not dependent on winning, approval, or control over others. It comes from knowing that no matter what happens, you will not abandon yourself. When you master yourself, you stop needing validation, because your sense of worth is no longer outsourced. You stop chasing control, because you already have it where it matters most. Discipline becomes effortless when self-mastery is present, because there is no inner chaos pulling you in opposite directions. Your actions become clean, direct, and intentional. People around you feel this without understanding it. They sense calm, certainty, and depth. Because a person who is not ruled by impulse cannot be shaken easily. This kind of power does not announce itself, it does not argue, it does not rush, it simply moves with clarity. Self-mastery also frees you from the past, because you are no longer reacting from old wounds unconsciously. You see patterns forming and interrupt them before they take control. You stop repeating cycles not through force, but through awareness. This is why self-mastery changes everything. Your relationships become healthier, your decisions become kinder, your mind becomes quieter. Life stops feeling like a battle and starts feeling like a dialogue. In a world that constantly tries to pull you to reaction, outrage, fear, and comparison, the person who has mastered themselves becomes untouchable. Nothing outside has the authority to dictate their inner state. This is the kind of power that cannot be taken. Because it was never given by the world in the first place, it was claimed from within.